Welcome to episode 530 of the show. Today we're still on problems around demand generation. If you remember from the previous episodes, the summary that we arrived at was that when we talk about demand generation, we're essentially talking about content creation and content promotion. And that's because the deal with demand generation is that you're trying to look for ways to create awareness and interest in your product or your service. Now, in the days of the internet, that is essentially going to be achieved through creating content, videos, blog posts, podcast episodes, interviews. Let's see, what else? White papers. I mean, for people in the business to business space, whatever it is that you can put out over there in the internet, push out to the world so that people can find you, get interested about you, your brand, your product, your service, whatever it is that you do. So when you think demand generation, think content creation and content promotion. Now, that essentially is the problem with demand generation, especially for those of you who think that going out and talking to strangers, canvassing, prospecting, more old school ways of trying to drum up business, if you find those ones too troublesome. So, to be effective at demand generation, your content has to be produced on a regular basis. So, you can't just produce one video, one blog post, one whatever, and hope that that thing is going to be viral and that's going to give you all the business that you need. So, apart from producing multiple pieces, you have to do it on a regular and a periodic basis. So, it's not just enough to produce one thing today and then call it a night. If you're producing today on a Monday, then perhaps you ought to consider publishing it every single Monday for the rest of the year, for as long as you can, until you see the results that you're looking for, or until some other much more important consideration comes into the mix, and then you have to change your cadence. But you have to pick some sort of cadence, and it's something that I alluded to in previous episodes. I think maybe 3 or 4 episodes back, that your cadence would depend on your product or your service, the market conditions, the market trends, the level of trust or relationship that you have with your audience. So these and many more are the things that will determine how often it is that you have to produce. And I'm not sure if I mentioned this on the podcast episode, but I definitely did on the blog. I gave an example of someone who runs a franchise business for online betting. So if you're one of those people who run a franchise for Bet Niger, or what's that one called? Better Bet, and there are loads of these companies now anyway. So in case you run one of those franchises, if you're going to produce content, you don't expect to just produce one post and that's enough for the whole year. And now we're talking about betting. So producing things on a daily basis, I think, might be I don't think that's going to be effective. So those of you in that space who run these sorts of franchises, you're probably thinking about things in terms of maybe every hour, every 2 hours, every 3 hours, or maybe every 4 hours. Because to make your money on bets, it's a margin business, because you're making money off of the spreads that people place when they bet. So it's not like you're making a huge killing per user. Sorry, not per user. What are they called? People who have accounts with you. If you're the one who runs the betting operation, I'm not sure what those people are going to be called. I don't know if I should call them user or customer. Well, anyway, for now, let's just call them user until I find out what the proper term is. So you're not going to make a ton off of each user, unlike a wedding photographer, for instance, who might make a profit of 100,000 or 200,000 per customer. For you who runs the betting outfit, you're not going to make that much per user. So the key actually is to have the users come back multiple times a day, multiple times a week, multiple times a month, dozens or hundreds of times a year, so that the small sum that you're making off of them on each bet, whether it's 1 naira or 5 naira or 100 naira, all of those things add up. So if you're making, let's say, 100 naira per user each time he places a bet, then you're not going to make much money if this guy only shows up once a week. So you want him placing 5, 6 bets a week, so that $100 adds up to about 500 or 600 naira a week. And then if you have him coming back every single month, that might be okay at 500 naira every week. That's 2,000 naira every month, per user. And let's say you're able to get 1 million users, and now you see where the profit comes from. Because it's going to be small margins, you're trying to get as many people as possible to come back as often as possible. Now, if your content drip or your content cadence is going to be once a day, you're not going to be able to achieve that to get the person to come multiple times a day or multiple times a week. So people in that betting space, they have to look for ways to put out things every hour or every 2 hours. So right now, they might put out something about the World Cup, that the match against okay, I'm not a football person, so let me just make stuff up. So I might just put out something. The match between Russia versus Ukraine starts in 3 hours, and so maybe that's all the posts that they put out right now across Instagram. What else? The website, emailing list, everything. Then in another hour, they might have to go into some much more detailed, the content that I might put after that might be much more detailed. It might be inviting you to place a bet and saying that these are the odds. That the odds against Russia are this, the odds against Ukraine are that, and maybe that's the next post. And then in another hour, it might be an expose on the captain of the Russian team, and then maybe the captain of the Ukrainian team, the stats in their favors, the odds against them, and then maybe introducing some new bets about introducing some new odds about placing a bet about who is going to get the first penalty kick or who's going to get the first red card or whatever. And then the post after that might be another expose based on the defensive lineup. These are the people in the defensive lineup for the Russians, these are the people in the defensive lineup for the Ukrainians, and these are how the odds stack here, these are how the odds stack there, and on and on and on and on. And I'm sure you guys get the point that I'm trying to make. So for those people in the betting space, this has to be an hourly thing, or maybe every 2 hours, or maybe every 3 hours, because the goal here is to get people to come back multiple times today, multiple times during the week, multiple times during the month, so that margin that you make on each user, that 1 naira, that 10 naira, that 50 naira, or that 100 naira, grows and grows and grows. So that's what I mean when I say that your cadence is going to be determined by the product, the service, the market conditions, the trends, the industry, and what have you. Now, looking at these two that we've mentioned right now, the wedding photographer who could make a profit of 120k to 200k or more per customer, and then the sport betting franchisee owner who can only make maybe $100 or $200, per user. You see that since you now have widely different cadences, because you're trying to get people to have you top of mind, seeing that you guys have widely different cadences, the problem now is how are we going to decide what content to create, and how do we decide how often to promote it? So am I creating one piece of content every day and then promoting it every hour, or am I creating 10 pieces of content today and then promoting them every 12 hours for the rest of the week? These are the sorts of questions that people have to contend with when you're doing demand generation. So you can see that if you're someone who is running away and trying to do the least amount of work possible, it's also possible that demand generation isn't for you, because these are the kinds of tough questions that you have to ask yourself. But one way that we can go about resolving this difficulty is to come up with a content calendar, because a content calendar removes a couple of things. Number one, a content calendar, it cures for motivation, because sometimes you wake up and you're not particularly motivated to record anything, to write anything, to draw anything, to photograph anything. Sometimes it's lack of motivation, and other times you're well motivated, but you're not sure exactly what it is that you are supposed to do because you don't have any ideas. So even though you're revving to go and you have your camera, you know that you want to shoot something, and you know that you have to promote something, but what to promote, you just don't know. So a content calendar at least cures these problems. Now, a content calendar doesn't have to be anything fancy. If you work in a TV or radio station, then the content calendar is really fleshed out with what are those things called? Production schedules and everything. But for ordinary folks like you and I, who don't work in media outfits, a diary can serve as a content calendar. some sort of schedule can serve as a content calendar, and an actual calendar on your phone, or the ones that you hang on the wall or put on your desk, can actually be a content calendar as well. For me, my content calendar is just a rough sheet with a running list of questions that I have on my phone. And so when I wake up every day, I just answer the question that is at the top. When I'm done with that, I delete. The next day, I'm going to answer the next set of questions. And this topic that we're delving into right now actually was a question that was put to me by one of the participants at the Evolve Africa Business Incubation at the Evolve Africa Business Incubation session. So this was the question. After the session was done, I just put it on top of the list, and today is the day for answering this question, and I'm answering the question. And that's also the reason why all the topics that we've been treating so far have been tied into either demand generation or prospecting and canvassing this last couple of days, because these were the sorts of questions that I was getting at the time during the seminar, and then all of them were just lumped together, and voila, the magic of the content calendar. I don't have to think, I just wake up and I answer the next question that is there, and it's not down to my motivation or what my creative flair is for the day. So if you have a diary, it's going to be the same. You can put in your diary January 1st. What is demand generation? January 2nd, types of demand generation. January 3rd, how to cure for problems of demand generation. January 5th, is demand generation for you. January 6th, you get the idea. You just put up a diary, and then you just put these headings, these questions, or whatever it is, and then you wake up and you know that this is what we have to tackle for the day. And it's the same thing with a schedule, or it's the same thing with a calendar. For those of us who use calendars on our phone, who have stopped using those physical calendars. So this is the thought process behind having a content calendar, and it can help you guys keep going on and on and on. You'd be surprised how long you can keep at content production once you have a content calendar. And that's the reason why I have over 500 and this is 530. This is episode 530. So that's the reason why I have over 500 episodes of this podcast, and that's because there is a content calendar. There's a running list of questions, and after I'm done with today's episode, I don't have to worry about what tomorrow's episode is going to be, because once I pick up my phone and I open the list of questions, it's going to be there. All I have to do is put on the microphone and then start recording. And then when I'm done, pull up the keyboard and then start typing. And I'm able to go at it consistently. And that's the reason why for the blog post, we have over 380 blog posts right now. Is because the process is essentially the same. So if you're one of those folks who doesn't like talking to strangers, and you don't believe in canvassing and old school ideas around prospecting, attending trade fairs, going for meetings, networking, all the hobnobbing that is required, if you don't want all that hassle, then demand generation is for you. But just remember that demand generation is not hassle free. We have all these questions of what are you supposed to produce regularly, periodically, every day? How often do you have to promote, reuse, rehash? And it's going to depend on your product or service, the industry, the market conditions, the trends at the time. So it's going to be a whole lot of a hassle. But one way that you can cure this hassle is to make sure that you have a content calendar. If you have some sort of diary, some sort of schedule, some sort of a calendar, some sort of a rough sheet, some people even use what's that thing called? Microsoft Excel, and put it into spreadsheets. So if you use a spreadsheet, whatever it is that catches your fancy, so long as you have something like this, the journey is not going to be as hard as it needs to be. So with this, I haven't had a look at the questions, so I'll be surprised if there's anything else that is demand generation related after this. But I suspect that we're coming to the close of this part of the narrative arc on the podcast. That's looking at prospecting, demand generation, and ideas around how we drum up business. So thank you very much for listening to episode 530 of the podcast. Thanks for your time and attention. Remember that you guys can ask me anything. And yes, if you do ask me anything on WhatsApp or Telegram, your questions will become part of my content calendar. So I hope you guys see how it works. So ask me anything by sending me a voice note or a message on WhatsApp or Telegram. The number is 080-6466-2140. Again, the number is 080-6466-2140. 2140. The country code for Nigeria is +234. Again, the country code +234. Thanks again for listening to episode 530. I'll catch you guys at the next podcast episode.